A king lies face down in the snow, bleeding through his clothes while armed men search the mountains for his body. The English have put 50 pieces of gold on his head, but the men hunting him aren't English. They're Scots who once followed him into battle. Robert the Bruce has lost his army, buried his crown, and abandoned the war he started.
Will not go to Norway. Leave me. Go home to your families. We're done.
Now the only people standing between him and death are a widow and 3 children whose family has already paid for his failures. Saving him could get them all killed. Turning him in could make them rich. And the widow has more reason than anyone to let him die. Years earlier, Scotland is still reeling from the execution of William Wallace. The country remains divided, the English crown still controls the land, and 2 powerful Scottish nobles are competing for the right to rule. Robert the Bruce meets his rival, John Comyn, inside a chapel. Comyn claims he is ready to end their struggle. He offers to abandon his claim to the throne and support Robert instead, but his loyalty comes with a price. He wants land, money, and protection. On the surface, it sounds like a political bargain that could finally unite Scotland behind one king. Robert doesn't believe him. He already knows Comyn has arranged to betray him to the English. The meeting isn't a truce, it's a trap, designed to place Robert in enemy hands before he can challenge for the crown. With armed guards waiting outside, Robert has only seconds to decide whether to surrender or strike first. The argument becomes a fight inside the chapel. Blades come out, and the 2 men struggle beneath the eyes of God. By the time it ends, Comyn is dead on sacred ground, and Robert has crossed a line that can never be undone. Outside, Comyn's men attack. Robert's loyal supporter James Douglas leads the defense, cutting a path through the chaos while Robert escapes. Killing Comyn removes one rival, but it also deepens the divisions, tearing Scotland apart. Robert soon claims the throne and declares himself King of Scots. Yet a crown doesn't create an army, and a declaration doesn't defeat England. He may have won the struggle inside the chapel, but the larger war is only beginning. Every defeat from this point forward will cost him soldiers, allies, and the trust of the people he expects to follow him. For years, Robert fights to hold his claim. For years, he loses. English power crushes one attempt after another. Scottish nobles withdraw their support, and men who once believed in him begin wondering whether they chose the wrong king. By the middle of another brutal winter, almost nothing remains of his campaign. Robert is hiding in the woods with only a handful of exhausted followers. They have little food, no safe position, and no clear path to victory. James Douglas still refuses to accept defeat. He tells a young follower named Hamish that Robert will never stop fighting, because men like him believe the king's determination is stronger than hunger, cold, or fear. But Robert overhears them, and instead of offering another speech,
Will not go to Norway. Leave me. Go home to your families. We're done.
the men stare at him, certain they must have misunderstood. They have followed him through defeat after defeat because they believed he would eventually lead them home as free men. Robert now orders them to leave and return to whatever lives they still have. He no longer sees himself as the man who can save Scotland. He sees himself as the reason so many Scots are dead. The crown that once represented destiny has become nothing more than a piece of metal, and Robert hides it beneath a tree before walking away from the men who once called him king. Douglas and Hamish remain loyal, but others have reached the end of their faith. A royal proclamation promises 50 gold pieces to anyone who captures Robert. To starving soldiers, that reward could buy land, food, and safety. 3 former followers begin discussing whether the man they once protected is worth more alive than free. One of them, Will, is willing to hunt him. Another fears that murdering an anointed king would condemn them before God.
We don't have to kill him. Only capture.
Robert released them from his service, and they decide that release also frees them from loyalty. Not far away, a widow named Morag McPhee is raising 3 children in a remote mountain cottage. Scott is her young son. Ivor and Carney are her niece and nephew, taken in after their own family was torn apart. At night, Morag tells them stories about Robert the Bruce, including the bloody meeting with John Comyn. To the children, Robert is already becoming a legend, a warrior, an outlaw, and a king fighting for Scotland. But inside this house, the legend carries a personal cost. Morag's husband joined Robert's cause and never came home. Scott has no patience for heroic stories. Other people may call Robert brave, but Scott remembers the empty place at the table and the grave where his father now lies. To him, the king is not a symbol of freedom. He is the man who sent fathers into battles he couldn't win. Morag still believes her husband made his own choice, yet she understands her son's anger. She can keep the fire burning, feed the children, and teach them how to survive the winter, but she cannot give Scott the father he lost. The family is also trapped inside a divided Scotland. Their clan has aligned itself with the English, and the local sheriff, Brandu, enforces that loyalty.
Ah, Scott! You wee scoundrel! Come here, nephew!
He is Morag's brother-in-law, the brother of her dead husband, and he uses that connection as an excuse to interfere in her life. He presents himself as a protector, but his concern always carries a threat beneath it. He wants control over Morag, her home, and the children. With no husband and few allies nearby, she has to measure every word she speaks around him. Robert continues on foot with no destination beyond the next patch of shelter. He has sent away the people most capable of protecting him, and the former soldiers following his trail know how he moves. They catch him in the wilderness and attack. Robert may have abandoned his war, but he hasn't forgotten how to fight. He kills 2 of the men in a savage struggle, turning old comrades into more bodies added to his burden. Will survives long enough to wound him badly. Robert escapes, but each step drains what little strength he has left. He reaches a cave and collapses inside. There is no army coming to find him, and no castle waiting beyond the snow. His enemies control the roads, his supporters are scattered, and the blood running from his wound is beginning to freeze. As he sits in the darkness, he notices a spider trying to build its web. Again and again the creature falls. Each failure destroys part of its work, but it climbs back and starts over. Robert watches as it makes one more attempt and finally succeeds. If a creature that small can fail repeatedly without surrendering, what does it mean for a king to quit while his country is still occupied? Robert had treated defeat as proof that his cause was finished. The spider suggests something more painful. Perhaps defeat only proves that the work is unfinished. But before he can act on that thought, he still has to survive the night. Will makes his way back to Brandu and reports that Robert is wounded nearby. A dying king should be easy money, but Brandu has no intention of sharing the reward.
It's the Bruce's sword.
He kills Will, conceals what happened, and organizes the search himself. To everyone around him, he pretends to be a loyal official protecting the district. In truth, he wants Robert delivered into his hands, the gold placed in his pocket, and any witness removed. During the search, Robert's sword is recovered, giving Brandu proof that the wounded fugitive is close. The sword eventually reaches Carney, who is learning the blacksmith's trade under a man named Sean. Carney brings the weapon to the forge for repair, unaware that it belongs to the hunted king. At the blacksmith's home, he spends time with Sean's daughter Brianna. Their affection is awkward but obvious. Carney wants to look capable in front of her, while Brianna sees through most of his attempts to impress her. In another life, their biggest concern might have been whether either one had the courage to admit how they felt. But Robert's presence is pulling everyone toward danger. While hunting in the woods, Scott, Ivor, and Carney find a man lying in the snow. This is the broken king from the beginning, but now the children understand exactly how he got there. He is injured, barely conscious, and in no condition to threaten anyone. The children choose to save him. They pull Robert from the snow and secretly carry him back to the cottage, placing their entire household in danger before Morag can stop them.
Children, that man in there, and we know who he is. Our lives are in great danger with him in the croft.
She knows exactly what helping him could cost. Brandu has men throughout the area. The English reward guarantees that neighbors may become informants, and the children are terrible at keeping secrets. She also knows what Robert's war already took from her. She could end the danger by turning him over. Instead, she treats his wound and gives him shelter.
Children! I need your help!
Her decision is not blind devotion. Morag doesn't forget her husband's grave or pretend Robert's failures never happened. She saves him because she refuses to let Brandu, the reward, or the English occupation decide what kind of person she becomes. Her husband believed Scotland was worth fighting for, and whatever she thinks of Robert, she will not sell a wounded man to the people hunting him.
Hold him down! Hold him! Come in here. Say it.
From that moment on, the cottage becomes both a refuge and a trap. Robert is safe only as long as nobody discovers he is there. recovery is slow. Robert cannot simply stand, lift a sword, and become a king again. For days, he depends on the same family whose loss represents the cost of his ambition. Morag changes his bandages. The children bring food and watch him with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and resentment. Outside, Brandu's men search the woods. Inside, Robert has nowhere to hide from the consequences of his decisions. Every object in the cottage reminds him that ordinary families paid for wars planned by nobles. Scott refuses to treat him like a hero. Eventually, the anger between them can no longer remain unspoken. Robert learns that Scott's father died while fighting under his banner. He doesn't defend himself by claiming that freedom required sacrifice. He doesn't tell the boy that kings cannot be blamed for every soldier who falls.
Put the knife down now, He's not my dad. He doesn't tell me what to do in my own house.
I'm sorry. Your father isn't here for you. I am sorry he died in my war. I'm sorry he isn't here to see you grow into a fine young man. He'd be ever so proud of you. But if it's revenge you want, a life for a life, take mine.
He apologizes. It is a small act compared with the life that was lost, but it matters because Robert finally speaks to one of the children left behind by his campaign. Scott cannot forgive him immediately, and Robert does not demand forgiveness. Their relationship changes through work rather than speeches. As Robert regains his strength, he helps the children prepare food, handle weapons, and protect the house. He teaches Carney how to fight with a sword. He helps Ivor and Scott improve with their bows. The lessons give the children confidence, but they also reveal the terrible reality surrounding them. Robert is not training them for sport. He knows the search will eventually reach Morag's door. Living with the family also forces Robert to confront the lie beneath his old confidence. He once believed God had chosen him to be king. After years of defeat, he admits that God did not choose him, he chose himself. That confession strips away the excuse of destiny. If Robert claimed the crown by his own decision, then he must also accept responsibility for what followed. He cannot blame heaven for lost battles, or expect ordinary people to keep dying simply because he calls himself their ruler. Morag challenges him without treating him as worthless. She sees the guilt consuming him, but she also sees what surrender would mean. Her husband's death cannot be reversed. Giving up will not bring him home. It will only ensure that everything he fought for disappears with him. Robert begins to understand that continuing the struggle does not have to mean repeating his old mistakes. A king should not ask his people to serve his crown. The crown should serve the people willing to risk everything for their country. For a brief time, the cottage feels almost like a family home again. Robert shares meals with them, listens to their stories, and becomes less like the distant figure from Morag's tales. Carney gains confidence. Ivor proves she can remain calm with a bow. Scott slowly separates the man in front of him from the legend he resented. Even Morag allows herself to imagine that Robert may survive the winter. But every day he remains hidden increases the chance that Brandu will discover them. The danger finally becomes real when one of Brandu's loyal men sees Robert inside the cottage. The secret that kept the family alive is gone. Brandu gathers armed men and prepares to attack. He does not plan to arrest Robert peacefully. Everyone who protected the king can now be treated as an accomplice, and dead witnesses cannot challenge Brandu's version of events. Morag's kindness has brought an armed force to her home, exactly as she feared.
And if the man we seek is alive, I'll cleave his head in two.
I bet you will.
What man is that?
You should ask your boyfriend.
Brianna overhears the plan before the men leave. She could remain silent and protect herself, but Carney is inside that cottage. She races through the winter to warn the family. Her arrival gives them only a little time, but that warning changes everything. Running is no longer possible. Robert is still recovering. The snow slows them down, and Brandu controls the surrounding territory. If they flee together, they will be hunted in the open. If they surrender Robert, Brandu may kill them anyway. They choose to defend the home. Robert organizes the family according to what each person can do. Scott and Ivor climb into the trees with their bows, giving them a clear view of the men approaching. Carney hides a sword where he can reach it without revealing that he is armed. Brianna takes cover near the barn. Morag remains in the open, knowing Brandu will come to her first. The plan is dangerous because it depends on children fighting experienced men, but Brandu has left them no safe choice. When Brandu arrives, he still behaves as though Morag belongs to him.
You've not noticed a man through the winter here, in my brother's house? Give him to me. wife. But protect him and allow no choice. Think of the children. Carney, Arthur, your Scott. And you, last of all, you, Morag, to be the sight of Worms!
He demands answers, threatens the household, and strikes her when she resists. Robert can remain hidden and buy himself more time, but doing so would turn Morag's family into a shield. That is the kind of king he used to be, a man protected by the sacrifices of others. He refuses to be that man again. Robert steps into view and declares that, as King of Scotland,
I am Robert the Bruce. Your king.
Morag and her family are under his protection. The statement gives Brandu exactly what he wanted, proof that Robert is there. But it also gives the family something they have never had from the crown. Robert is no longer asking them to die for him. He is placing himself between them and the men who came to destroy their home.
He's our king!
Brandu orders the attack, and the quiet cottage becomes a battlefield. The fighting is brutal and cramped. There are no thousands of soldiers, no cavalry charge, and no wall of shields. Every movement happens within sight of the family's door. Every wound threatens someone whose name they know. The family's only advantage is that they prepared the ground and trust one another. Brianna leaves cover to help, putting herself directly in the fight. Her warning gave the family a chance, but it also brought her into the center of the violence. During the battle, she is killed. The victory Carney hoped to earn becomes meaningless the moment he sees her fall. He reaches her too late, and the young woman who risked everything to save him dies beside the home she tried to defend. The loss nearly breaks Carney, but the fight is not finished. Robert and the children manage to bring down the remaining attackers until Brandu himself is left. Brandu is moments from killing the king when Morag intervenes. The family wins, but the ground around the cottage is covered with bodies, and Brianna is still dead. They bury Brianna before leaving the cottage, carrying her memory into whatever comes next. Robert can no longer remain in the region. Brandub's death will bring more men, and Morag's family has openly chosen the side of the outlaw king. Their old life is finished. Robert leads them through the mountains toward the fortress of Angus MacDonald, a Scottish lord who may still offer protection. The journey is more than an escape. It is the first step in rebuilding the network of families, clans, and fighters Robert abandoned when he ended the war. At the fortress, the gates open. Robert is welcomed not as a defeated fugitive, but as the King of Scots. Morag and the children enter with him, no longer isolated inside a cottage controlled by Brandub. Robert has not defeated England. He has not yet won the battle that will make his reign secure, but he has recovered the one thing he lost before his army disappeared: a reason to keep fighting. That reason is no longer personal glory or a belief that God guaranteed his victory. Robert returns to the war, understanding that leadership is not the right to spend other people's lives. It is the duty to stand in front when the cost arrives. Years later, Morag walks alone to Scott's grave. The boy who once hated Robert eventually chose to fight beside him. Scott followed the king to the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, where Robert's forces defeated a much larger English army. The victory helped secure the freedom Robert had nearly stopped believing was possible. But Scott did not return home. Like his father, he gave his life to the cause. Morag stands before the grave of her son, surrounded by the silence left after victory. Scotland remembers Bannockburn as the moment Robert the Bruce rose, united his people, and broke England's power. Morag remembers the price. Her husband lies beneath the earth. Scott lies beneath the earth. Brianna is gone. The crown survived because ordinary people carried it when the king no longer could.